Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're watching us, and however you're watching us. Thank you for making the Sports and the World podcast part of your day. I'm the David. Hope all of you are well and safe out there. A lot to get to. News from the NBA world. Obviously NBA season is starting, but something happened early. We'll lead off with that. And according to the NFL, another head college football head coach hiring another WNBA, potentially two WNBA head coaches being hired as well. I'll share my thoughts on that. But let's lead off with the big story with the NBA opening night, and then the next day we have this scandal taking place here, where we have most notably coaches Chauncey Billups, uh, Terry Rozier, and former Damon Jones, former WNBA, excuse me, that's WNBA, former NBA player. Apologies, I had WNBA on the break. And essentially, so let's break it down. Now, we're reading a lot of it. I want to put like CBS Sports covered it, and we're going to go in, and they listed why each person involved was arrested. So I want to talk about why Billups, Terry Rozier, and Damon Jones were arrested. Now, for Billups, he was allegedly involved in rigged poker games connected to the mafia per the FBI. And so long story short, he also might be tied to sharing inside information with bettors as the head coach of the Portland Trailblazers as well. And in the indictment alleges that a co-conspirator aide supplied information about the Blazers resting key players ahead of a game in March 2023 that was against the Bulls, as Damian Lillard, Yusuf Nurkic, Jeremy Grant, and Anthony Simmons all sat out that game, and the Blazers lost by 28. A lot going on there. Thiago Splitter will be taking over the interim head coach there, and Damian Jones, former NBA veteran with the Heat and the Cavs, notably, he allegedly passed along inside information in regard to two Laker games that were under investigation. And so when Jonte Porter, the former Toronto Raptors forward, he was already banned for life in the NBA for violations similar to those for which Rozier is being investigated for. So basically, when we look at this grand scale, how does Commissioner Adam Silver handle this? That's the penultimate question here. And they use the Porter case as the precedent. And when you look at the NBA, Article 35 of the NBA Constitution lays out the terms specifically for possible dismissal and disqualification from the sport. So I'll read from that really quickly. The commissioner shall direct the dismissal and perpetual disqualification from any further association with the association of any of its members, of any player found by the commissioner after hearing to have been guilty of offering, agreeing, conspiring, aiding, or attempting to cause any game of basketball to result otherwise than on its merit. So essentially, we could be looking at suspensions and bans here. Now, when you look at the teams involved, the Heat and the Trailblazers, it's a different case, and probably, for Rozier especially, he's on expiring contract and all of that. And the NBA clearly came out and said that they're in the process of reviewing the indictments today. And Rozier and Bill have been placed on leave from their teams and to cooperate with authorities, and how the integrity of our game is raised priority. Folks, the reality is this. And before we go any further, I see people in the chat here. Everybody, correct, if I acknowledge you, thank you, John, and hey there, LD from my tribal, well, my wise man, I should say. Thank you, Craig, for joining me as always. Good guy, IDP guy. That's your guy right there. Excellent stuff. But to get back on, to put a button on this NBA thing, it leads me to two streams of thoughts. It doesn't surprise me because I remember the whole Tim Donaghy thing, and with the former referee. So for the fact that the FBI has been looking at this, for the WNBA to be the first, for this to happen of this magnitude is not really surprising. But But secondly, now the question becomes, and I've seen a lot on Twitter and social media in general, is what league is next? Is the NFL, Major League? What league is next to have this sort of investigation? And but once again, with this, as far as the NBA situation is concerned, listen, I think Billups, Rozier, I think they're done. I know it's premature. The criminal justice to me just thinks ahead occasionally. Like I said, I wish Haley Murphy was here. She's traveling. She's in Ann Arbor. If you're watching, Haley, love you, miss you. Hopefully she'll be back on the show next week. But that'll be something I'll probably discuss with her because if you check out her stuff as well, her other Twitter page, Out of Your Legally, she talked about the situation with Emmanuel Class A, Luis Perez. It's a great situation there, and then she gives her thoughts and opinions on that. But to put a button on this, I just think Chauncey Billups, and I think they're done. I don't see a situation where they can come back from it. I think given that no matter what the league is, there's the integrity. When the integrity is compromised, and they give a list of games that potentially have been compromised, that makes it harder. And now it's for Adam Silver, it's about protecting the integrity of the league and of that nature. So I'm very curious on that note. Quick switch there. And one of those things is that I think from the reality is that I'm just curious to see what else happens if we get out of this investigation. And getting that out of the way, listen, to bring the NBA into a positive light. Listen, great opening night. A couple of takeaways. Listen, I want to talk about Victor Wembanyama and how much. Listen, a guy his size be able to do the things that he does. He's the example, and people. Oh yeah, it's obvious that adaptability to the game, like big men who can just do everything, and Wemby is good on both sides of the ball. 40 points, 15 to 21 shooting, 15 boards. Listen, it just seems San Antonio knows how to figure it out now with their first full season without Greg Popovich. Which is weird, by the way. It's very weird. It's that they know how to get big men and the talented. Like they had Tim Duncan from two decades. They know franchise players. They know when to draft them and know how to build and mold them. So in that game when he played Dallas, Luka 43, 12, and 9. Luka, to me, this is what we got to talk about the Lakers. Because first of all, shout out to, it's weird to have to see the Inside NBA on ESPN, but I want to hark back to what Charles Barkley said, where there was no LeBron obviously, but how the Lakers really didn't make any moves, and one of their big moves was signing DeAndre Ayton because they didn't have any big men. I think I talked about this last season, about how they just lacked depth, especially at the 5, and it just really seemed as though. Okay, they went and got DeAndre Ayton, and to Chuck's point, I'm like, he should be eating. Like Luka needs the second score. It sounds obvious, 43, and that wasn't a loss. They lost, and not stepped in probably the greatest game, but had with Jimmy Butler and Kuminga there and all that. But the fact is that the Lakers went out and got a 5 in DeAndre Ayton, gave him a nice contract. I listen, it's just game 1. I'm not saying hit the panic button, but if DeAndre Ayton can be the guy that we kind of saw in Phoenix, then the Lakers could do something, because the West, as we know, is very, 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 very loaded. And like I said, Gab Gowdy, shout out to her. Like I loved her pick of the Memphis Grizzlies as one of those sleeper teams. John Morant, they traded away Desmond Bain, they got Jaren Jackson. There's a nice core there that I like there in Memphis. And out east, the Knicks over the Cavs. And I don't think I did any NBA predictions last week, which is my fault. But listen, coming out of the East, I just really like Cleveland. I think Cleveland's performance after last season, how their season ended, I think that offseason, I think it's on a mission. And I don't see Indiana kind of competing, given the Halliburton injury. with the Boston with Jason Tatum. There's an opportunity for these. It's essentially, basically the Cavs and the Knicks, and if there was a team that could potentially maybe do something like people, if Philly's healthy, I'll ease them into the conversation. But I look at up and coming. I look at Orlando. Like I live here in Florida. Franz Wagner, and I'm looking at Jalen Suggs, and I'm looking at. Excuse me. Why is the player's name escaping me? But it'll come to me when I start yapping. It'll come to me. But it's one of those things where, like the East has talent. And now, if we're assuming that the Pacers are out of it, we're assuming Boston, Paolo Banchero was the name I was searching for. I was reaching for in the bag. So I got it. So I think the East, I listen, give me Cleveland, give me the Knicks. The Knicks situation is that it's interesting when they fired, and I joked about this bringing Mike Brown. Like, here's the reality. Tom Thibodeau wasn't terrible. It was that now I want to see how the workload distributed, because 5 of the guys on the team, they finished in the top like 15 or 20 in minutes per game. How is Mike Brown going to handle the minutes of specifically Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns? That's the key. That to me is going to let me know what direction Mike Brown wants to go with this roster. Because listen, they were they were a series away from going to the NBA, Eastern Conference Finals. So, they're close. And to me, they have to make the excuse me, I keep saying I've already covered WNBA news at some point. To get to the NBA Finals. Because listen, I'm on the agenda where I just like Cleveland. I think they'll figure it out. Especially the way with Donovan Mitchell, and then Lonzo Ball. I like that. With Darius Garland being out, I think Jared Allen. I'm not night one, I'm not going to panic, because if that's the case, if you're a Clippers fan, you should panic, because the Jazz had a 20-point lead. Like, if we're going to do panic, you're a Clippers fan, like, yeah, I would definitely panic on that. But we'll cover obviously more of the NBA as the season progresses as well. But shifting gears, let's talk about the NFL. Let's talk about the week that was. I should say the week that was week 7. And folks, I say it every week. But this particular week here, I think we learned a lot. And shout out to my co-host Haley. She called the Bengals +5 on Thursday Night Football. Joe Flacco is the best. Think about this. Think about this for a minute. Joe Flacco on a plane, learning the playbook. And second start, and it feels like it's that. Listen, Jake Browning, respectfully, wasn't the guy. And if Cincinnati is understanding that, listen, our defense may not be great, so we need a guy who can get the ball out quickly, because we have T. Higgins, we have Jamar Chase. Let's figure it out. And if you go look at the targets, if you go look at the game, and you see how many targets, especially Jamar Chase. Think about this. Is just the Jamar Chase. This was his, the stat line. 23 targets, 16 receptions, 161 yards. The second player, T. Higgins, had 10 targets, 6 receptions, 96 yards received. And Joe Flacco went 31 of 47, 342, 3 touchdowns. Aaron Rodgers wasn't terrible. He went 23 of 34, 249, 4 touchdowns, but he had the 2 interceptions. It's the turnover tempo time. I talk about it all the time. Makes a difference. Cincinnati had 4 penalties to Pittsburgh 7. And they won the time of possession. It just seems maybe that, listen, Joe Flacco, wherever he goes, he lights the spark. And it's shocking to me that Cleveland made the trade with Cincinnati, interdivisional trades, because I remember I believe with Drew. I think Drew Bledsoe was traded by the Patriots to the Bills in division, and I'm finding like it's unprecedented that would happen, but it happens, and it just seems. And we're looking at Cincinnati. We're sitting there going, Cincinnati's 3-4. They're in a division where, if you look at it, they're just a game and a half. 3-4. They're in second place. Cleveland's a team. I'm telling you, it's going to be interesting to me because with Dylan Gabriel, because like I love Kevin Stefanski, I really do, but he had no business throwing the ball 52 times. I believe it was in his first game. What started overseas. And now you saw that, listen, give the ball to Quinshon Judkins, a guy who I talked about on Jim Covertree, who does great work at RotoWire on his 32 teams. I talked about Quinshon Judkins as being like that's the guy who they want. That's the guy who they're invested in. And Harold Fannin Jr. Like, you look at Cleveland, I've always said that if you give Stefanski the players that he wanted, because listen, he didn't want Deshaun Watson. I'm not trying to defend Kevin Stefanski's job security, but he didn't want Deshaun. The franchise wanted, the ownership probably wanted him. But you could tell when Deshaun was even on the field, like it didn't fit. And now we're seeing Kevin Stefanski. We're seeing him running the football, being efficient in the passing game. That's the formula that he had when he was the offensive coordinator with the Vikings, when he had Kirk Cousins. Run the football, smart, big throws, and like I said, and Cleveland's defense is Cleveland's defense. And so I say that's just something to consider. As for Baltimore, I think that they're in a situation where I don't see the listen. It would be a great story if they come and win this playoffs. But I ranted last week about how I feel about John Harbaugh, all of that. But listen, a healthy Lamar Jackson is an MVP candidate. Period. And he's easily the top 3 quarterback. I could argue top 2, maybe if he's anywhere outside of your top 3, we got to have a conversation. Because I'm curious to see who you have there in that range. So that was a fun Thursday. Thursday night games are getting fun. We have one tonight, Minnesota and Los Angeles, the Chargers. That should be a fun one up there at SoFi. I'll share my thoughts on that. Because in college football, I'm not doing any Browns big bets. I'll give my thoughts on the Thursday night football game as it plays. Because I got to figure out the college thing. Like I'm slumping. I missed out on the Notre Dame USC game by a half a point. So they lost by 10. I told you to take the 9.5. I just told you to take the alternate spread of 10.5, and that would have been great. That's on me, America. That's on me. That's on me, America, and parts of Europe. But when you look at other games across the league, and a couple of games kind of stood out for different reasons. I talked about Cleveland's job, how they did. Kansas City, with the addition, having Rashee Rice back. Game changer. This Chiefs offense looks more balanced. It looks more efficient. Because listen, how do I know they missed Rashee Rice? 10 targets. Like the second most target on the team, I believe, went to Brashard Smith. But as for Rashee Rice, 7 receptions, 42 yards, 2 touchdowns. They missed Rashee Rice in this offense. Now with Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy, you still got Travis Kelce there, but like their run game is now looking pretty good with Pacheco, Smith, leaning on Smith more than Hunt now, because Brashard Smith had 14 carries for 39, and Isaiah Pacheco had 15 for 57 and a touchdown. So it feels like there's an identity there in Kansas City. Because remember, listen, I didn't want to write out Kansas. All I said was that they might have to be a wild card. But the way this AFC West is looking, it kind of feels like listen, it's Denver, Kansas City. Like there's a good chance. Like everybody has a shot outside of Las Vegas. Shout out to my friend Eddie. Apologies. But it feels like Denver's at 5-2, Kansas City's 4-3, along with the Chargers. Chargers win. They're 5-3. They're still in it. That's how that division gives me the vibes. It feels like, and think about this: both the AFC and NFC West very similar. 3 of the 4 teams are above 500, and the bottom team sits at 2-5. The Cardinals are 2-5 in the NFC West, and the Raiders are 2-5 in the AFC West. It's something about out west. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the. I argue it's coaching. Sean Payton. I'll get to him later because I have a few thoughts on Mr. Sean Payton. Andy Reid for the Chiefs, Jim Harbaugh for the Chargers. Not knocking Pete Carroll for the Raiders. There's just things they have to work out there, and questions at the quarterback position. You look out west in the NFC West. Sean McVay, Mike McDonald for the Seahawks. And you look at Kyle Shanahan out there for the 49ers. Coaching, I've always said this, and I'll stand on principle whenever I say this, is that in the NFL, coaching matters because there's less games. The fewer the games, the bigger the impact I feel. It's not knocking baseball. It's not knocking Major League Baseball. It's not knocking the NBA. But I feel coaching matters. And when we wonder why we see, especially football, why are these coaches getting fired in the season and why we're not firing after the season? Because you'll know at some point, like the Titans knew they were not going, that Brian Callahan was not going to be the coach in 2026. They said, why wait until the end of the season when we could do it now? And even that situation, Cam Ward's going to be fine. I think they're going to have to build around him, offensive line, more targets. Like Tyler Lockett asked for his release, and I think he's granted it. So there's work to do out there. But when I look at going back to making my point. So when we looked at, I told you about the Chiefs and Andy Reid, they're figuring it out. Good. Listen, we got to understand the 2-game preseason makes a big difference. Like I say week 1 through 3, it's like they're just trying to figure it out because you only have 2 the preseason games are limited, and a lot of coaches don't like to play their starters. And not calling out teams, but they know who they are. But when I start seeing like week 4 and up to now, we start to see like, oh, is it like if you're up to a 2-1, 3-0 start, is it real? And for teams who are struggling, like, oh man, can they turn around? Those are the teams that we deem good come out the gate struggling. They're going to be fine. Teams who come out the gate early, who we're shocked by, can they sustain it? And a lot of them have. A couple of them have. And when I'm looking, when you look back, like I'll go back to the Giants Bronco game because that's going to tie me into the whole Sean Payton, Russell Wilson thing. But for the Colts, think about this. Like Justin Herbert had 420 yards passing. Think about that. And they lost the football. 55 pass attempts. He had 2, but the thing is, 2 turnovers. And I'm telling you look at turnover tempo time. It's a great indicator to me. Chargers had 2 turnovers. They had double the penalties. And one they had was the time of possession where they did well. Here's the reality. Here's the situation. Is that I think a conversation has to be had. Like for this Colts team who went through it, losing Jim Irsay, and his daughters have done a fantastic job. Especially Carly, yeah, I believe, yeah. Her being on there, being on the sidelines, being a physical presence. I think it matters. I think her being there, like I said, it makes a whole lot of difference to me. And Carly Ursay Gibson, I want to make sure I have that name correct there. And the fact of the matter is that they're doing a phenomenal job. And Shane Steichen, Coach of the Year. To me, it's between Shane Steichen and the job that Mike Vrabel's doing. And by the way, getting a win on the road against the Titans, like I tell, like getting the right, like Tennessee. Here's the thing. I didn't mean to, let's harp on the coach day, but think about this. Tennessee had Mike Vrabel. Tennessee had Mike Vrabel. And here's the record that Mike Vrabel had. He was 9-7. I bet better yet, I'll do you one better. I'll just give you his overall record. I could go season by season. He went 54-45 with the Tennessee Titans. Made the playoffs 3 times. He went 9-7, 9-7, 11-5, 12-5, 7-10, and somehow he was fired after 6-11. Just one game less, and they let him go because they thought, we'll bring in Brian Callahan. You see the decline. He has 5 wins. We already know how many wins Tennessee has. Brian Callahan was fired with 4 wins in his time in the time he was with the Titans. New England, this New England team. Think about this. This New England team last season, which I don't want to get into because to me that's a breakdown for another day. They were 4-13. They've already exceeded their win total from last season. It's about culture. It's about coaching and culture. And you hear coaches talk about culture and changing it. Mike Vrabel's done that. And to me, like him and Steichen, like I don't know, because it's one of those situations where how do you separate? Because nobody expected the Colts to be good, but not top of the AFC good. And nobody had the Patriots. Like, okay, they're rebuilding. Mike needs a season to 5-2, atop the AFC East, and the Colts atop the AFC South. And we're sitting there laughing around, we're messing around. But listen, January comes and these teams could be playing each other in the AFC Championship game. Where it'll be played, that's a great question. But the reality is that, listen, it's an absolute shout out to them. It's a testament to, like I'll keep preaching it, coaching. Coaching matters. Culture. It makes a difference. And the fact of the matter is, what we're seeing is absolutely phenomenal to watch. And then you shift gears. I'll go back to talk about the NFC. I know Haley would love this. Like the Detroit Lions. You're like, they look this way and that way. And Dan Campbell's a good coach. They beat a very good Tampa Bay team. They're going to be fine. They're still atop the NFC South. I want to talk about what happened Sunday night but we'll get to that. But Detroit still good. They're going to be fine. Jared Goff, underratedly great quarterback. We have Jahmyr Gibbs. You have Amon-Ra St. Brown. We're seeing that we're always focused on maybe with Ben Johnson the reason. Then we saw maybe these guys are good. You get a coordinator like John Morton, I believe. Pick up where you left off. Dan Campbell went within. He didn't go outside. Promoted within, and you're seeing the results. And now you're seeing 5-2. And you look out in the NFC East. So Nick Sirianni, we talk about the Eagles, how that loss against Jalen throwing the ball. Jalen showed you. Jalen did what I felt Lamar Jackson did to show people that I'm not just a running quarterback. I can actually sling it. And against a very good Vikings team, we saw Jalen Hurts kind of once again do what great elite quarterbacks do. It separates, there's good, great, and elite. And for some reason, people want to say Jalen's just a great, a good. He's making the case to be an elite quarterback, to be a top 5 quarterback in this league. How do I know? I'll tell you. 19-23, 326 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. He didn't turn over the football. Had a 158.3, which is a perfect passer rating. He didn't run the ball. He had 4 attempts. Saquon didn't have his best game. But I tell you who did, Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown. Accounted for those 3 touchdowns, 2 by A.J. and 1 by Devontae. So when we get this narrative out here, and when we talk about this narrative about quarterback, Jalen Hurts just continued, like, I don't see it. Like, I don't see where people are knocking him with the negativity. I don't get it. Listen, I'm not saying I love the quarterback position. And when I look at Jalen Hurts, like, okay, Saquon's down, and like, oh, the offense is going to be terrible. But when you trust Jalen Hurts with the football, you get that. He can throw the football. Lamar Jackson had to prove to people, which I thought was hilarious, that, oh yeah, he can throw the ball. Like, he's not just a running. Stop putting people in a box. Just we got to stop doing that. And also, chat, if you want to drop your questions, drop your thoughts here, I will absolutely love it. I'll answer your questions and your thoughts here as well. Before we go any further, because I know I will forget, catch this episode, every episode of the Sports of the World podcast, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Follow on social media, Twitter and TikTok, @Laders_Brown, Instagram, Laders_Brown, Facebook. I'm putting the previews on I put it on my personal Facebook page, but I got to start putting it on the Sports of the World, the actual podcast page, which, note to self, I'll do that starting with a couple of games. I'll do the previews over the weekend. But nonetheless, I did say I wanted to go back and talk about the whole Sean Payton and Russell Wilson. After the game, if you're a Giants fan, I get it. I thought the Giants, they went into Denver, a big-time statement win, Brian Daboll, Jackson Dart, Cam Scatterbo, bam. And then Bo Nix was doing Bo Nix things. It happens. So, but that wasn't the story. That wasn't the story that came away. Like, shout out to that game. That game was great. It sucked that, the Giants came out on the losing end of that. But Sean Payton said something after the game. And it comes from Nick Shook, NFL.com. He talked about it. And I'll read a paragraph of it. It said, Payton's initial comments on Sunday praised Dart and the little spark the rookie has given to the Giants offense since replacing Wilson, adding that he had told Giants owner John Mara previously he was hoping New York would make the switch under center long after our game, suggesting that Payton would have preferred his team to face Wilson and not Dart. Let's start there, because there's beef in the streets here. Now, remember when Denver, they went all in and they traded for Russell Wilson and to get a franchise guy, which at that point from Seattle was a great move because it felt like Seattle wanted to move forward, I think, and then they went out and they found Geno and all of it. So they were looking to move on from as well. So it felt like both teams amicable from the trade perspective. However, it just felt that Russ he had his couple of good games. Yeah, he had some good games. And he just didn't look comfortable maybe in Payton's system. And so it begged the question. And the fact of the matter is, it basically ended when, listen, Wilson they cut him 2024, and they took on an $87 million, almost a $90 million cap hit. They wanted to get him out of town. And it just felt that I knew people that, Russ was washed. And no, I don't think he was washed. It just felt like, and there was I won't say conspiracy, but it sort of felt that Russ was benched. Go back and remember that Russ was benched I believe he was before the end of the season, and because they didn't want to pay him his money, and he was like, and so it just didn't feel right, and I was happy to see, Russ went on to play the season with Mike Tomlin in Pittsburgh, and then he ended up with the Giants, started a few games, and then Jackson Dart takes over. And Russ Russell Wilson's a guy who doesn't come out publicly a lot. And he basically he took the comments personally, as you should. He called them classless in the social media post. In fact, when you go to his social media post, when it came to Sean Payton's comments, he simply said classless but not surprised. Didn't realize you're still bounty hunting 15 plus years later, though, through the media. And he puts the hashtag Let's Ride joke. Listen, I'm on Team Russ on this because here's the thing. Two things can be absolutely true. And people don't let people tell you this. That Russ didn't fit what Sean Payton wanted to do. And maybe Sean Payton couldn't, okay, he coached Drew Brees. Drew Brees and Sean Payton are two different types of quarterbacks. And when we understand that, because the quarterback position, certain traits stand out more than others. I'll put it in that context. And I'll let you guys, the audience, figure that out, because you're a very smart audience. Not every quarterback comes with the same amount of traits. And maybe the skill set that Russell Wilson had didn't fit what Sean Payton wanted to do. And they were willing to eat a massive cap hit to say we're good. And then Sean Payton he drafts Bo Nix. You're good. Russ was gone. Russ moved on. You should have moved on. Like, you commended Jackson Dart, which was great. You should have commended your quarterback. Great. But, for you to say that, jokingly say that you told John Mara, who, I think his fans were rooting for him, hope he's sending thoughts and prayers to him and his family, had told him that, he wished that he had made the move long after the game, after, playing, Denver. That was a shot at Russ. I don't know how you can't sit there and say, man, we really want to face Russ. We want to face Jackson Dart. And Russ, to Russ's credit, he's been very, listen, we people call him corny and call him this. Listen, I didn't have the dangerous sandwich. Thought about it. I don't know if they still have it or not. I doubt it. But anyway, back to the point. The point is that Russ has been pretty good taking criticism. But this was personal. And when Russell Wilson spoke out on this, that's how I knew Sean Payton was wrong. Well, he was wrong for the comments anyway, but this would double down, made me feel like, nah, Sean, you can't say that. Sean, you listen, I'm not saying this because you coached against my Falcons, for decades. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that you're the coach. You're having success with Denver. Move on. Turn the page, turn the chapter, because it doesn't, at the end of the day, this doesn't look good for you. There's not a scenario where I say it looks good for you. And it doesn't, and it didn't look good for him. And people are out, listen, you can't defend it. And when Russell Wilson came out and penultimately all of that happened, everybody moved on. It's like if you're in a relationship, I wouldn't know anything about that. But there could be hatred and there could be a certain level of vitriolic feelings or behaviors. But if you're separated, I feel like you should root for them to succeed. Because don't root for failure in people. And in some cases, there's just the way I feel about it personally. Is that I feel like Sean Payton, listen, it didn't work out with Russ. You should have let it go. You didn't have to broach the comment. You really didn't have to broach the comment. You could have just let it go. be amicable, and be cool. But he didn't. And that's okay. At the end of the day, Russ is fine be mentoring Jackson Dart. And Sean Payton, you have Bo Nix. You're competing. You're in a position where you could actually win. You're atop the AFC West. That's your focus. Like, I expected better out of Sean Payton. Russ couldn't sit back because it was personal. I always say, I think John Wooden once said that when people attack your reputation, well, that's rated by people. That's fine. But when they attack your character, that's your core of who you are. That's personal. And that's essentially what I felt Sean Payton, he attacked Russell's character to a certain extent. Where, like, you think he couldn't play, he got help. No. Like, when Jackson Dart was drafted, you knew Jackson Dart was going to play this season. Listen, if you're a first-round quarterback, teams are going to want you on the field quick, fast, and easy. And penultimately, that's what happened. Giants struggled a bit. Some of it was Russ. Some of it was maybe offense, maybe trying to figure it out. It doesn't matter. Jackson Dart has given a spark to this Giants team. Potentially maybe saving Brian Daboll's job in the process. So that's just it's a message of, listen, I know being petty is one thing, but attacking someone's character, listen, wish for success. Just listen. Russ, that's my biggest takeaway from that whole situation. And before we turn the page on the NFL, there is one or two more games I do want to talk about. And in the first game I do want to talk about, it's a game where, where, listen, we could talk about the Falcons and 49ers game. Like, Christian McCaffrey looked like the old Chris McCaffrey, and that's very scary. They ran the ball against a very, very good, I believe, I get the Falcons' top-rated defense. Let's be clear. Like, they had a field day running the football. Christian McCaffrey, once again, it looked like man. Christian McCaffrey looked like Christian McCaffrey. And then you look on the other side of the ball for the Falcons, it's the consistency. Chelsea Messenger, I think she was talking about with Jacksonville. It's like which like Jaguar team, which Falcons team showed up. And it's the team that showed up and getting on tape. When you run it back, it was just Christian McCaffrey and the all-purpose yard. 129 on the ground and 72 in the passing game. It's like, and the two touchdowns he came on the ground. Like, Mac Jones didn't have a spectacular game. 17 to 26, 152. He threw an interception. And Michael Penix, 21 to 38, 241 and a touchdown. The key of this game was that this 49ers defense under Robert Saleh, no Fred Warner, no Nick Bosa, injuries. They held him to 40 yards rushing. However, he did have 52 receiving. So held him to under 100 yards of total scrimmage yards. And then, like, Kyle Pitts, was that like takeaway? Kyle Pitts getting the ball. 7 receptions, 62 yards. Like a matchup of two good tight ends. And George Kittle, by the way, here's the thing. George Kittle was targeted just 2 more times than any of us watching the game and had just as many receptions as you and I did. And somehow the 49ers won. Whether you want to believe it or not, Kyle Shanahan, if they could run the football, because I put one of my stats, like, to run the ball, they've been pretty good. In terms of, in that department, especially with receiving yards. And they had no Ricky Pearsall. They had Juwan, don't knock. Listen, I'm not saying I'm a Falcons fan. Don't knock them. Like, San Francisco beat a very good football team on Sunday night. And once again, don't count out teams. Like, listen, I always say, with the lack of preseason games, I look at the first 1 or 2 games, maybe 3, and go, okay, they're trying to get the kinks working out. Like week 3 or 4 beyond, depending where you are. I look after that and I go, okay, this is where, okay, you got to start putting things together, start showing signs that, whether you're a contender or pretender or somewhere in the middle. And listen, and these, and I think this is the final Monday night doubleheader, hopefully for a while. Listen, I talked about the Lions earlier beating a very good Tampa Bay team. Jahmyr Gibbs just phenomenal, and for Seattle, like Jackson Smith-Njigba making a case for Offensive Player of the Year, making the case. Listen, there's a lot of great receivers in the league, and here's the thing: when they traded DK Metcalf, Smith-Njigba was the number one guy. And we wonder why certain franchises, why are they trading? Because they believe in the person behind. It's no different. Pittsburgh, and then in turn, Pittsburgh traded George Pickens to Dallas, and having a pretty good time there so far in Dallas. So it's just that because they believe in the person that's, it's nothing with the skill set perspective. And we have April, Ron Thomas, and whatever everyone, what is up, Ron, April. So my take, listen, I talked about Seattle being one of those good teams. Mike McDonald, that defense looking good. Got to get healthy. Maybe they can move from the corner position. I don't know, secondary wise, but it looks like a very good football team. Now, before we get out of here, college coaches, they've been dropping like flies. Billy Napier, Gators coach, out. Not surprised, even though they beat Mississippi State. There's the bye week before the Jacksonville game, before we play Florida Georgia game. And it's about, and I guess that's, my whole thing is that it's the takeaway. College coaching, being a head football coach comes with multiple responsibilities. And throughout time, those responsibilities evolve. Now, it's not just about X's and O's, it's about NIL, building a roster. And Napier did I say this, I'll talk to my dad. And I told him, we had a conversation, I told him that USF game did him in. That loss did him in. Because that could have changed the whole landscape of the season. Losing to USF, the game management, the time management, that's what did Billy Napier in. And I wish him success wherever he goes. And then we talk about head coaching candidates. James Franklin's out. There's reports that Marcus Freeman said no thanks, he'll stay at Notre Dame, which I didn't expect him to leave Notre Dame, because we saw the last guy who left Notre Dame for the SEC. He could be on the lookout for another job, but we'll get to him in a minute. But there's a couple of names out there that's interesting who, to be honest, I wouldn't be shocked if they don't finish the season or they get rid of him. Listen, it's not me being that guy, but Mike Norvell, FSU. Listen, 36 and 31, in an ACC that it feels like, not say up for grabs, but Clemson came at the gates from. I think what's stopping them is that, do they have enough money to have the package to fire? Because remember when Jimbo Fisher, who left FSU to go to Texas A&M, Texas A&M said, we'll give you almost $100 million. We'll get you out the door. And they got him out the door. No problem. My issue is, I don't think FSU is you can say you're standing behind them, but do you have the money to get rid of them? And I think that's the reality with the buyout. I just don't feel they have the money to get rid of Norvell as of yet. And listen, I talk about Brian Kelly, he's 34-13. He has a 723 winning percentage. It's LSU. And someone brought up this point, every LSU coach has won a national championship. At the last, think about that. You walk, and I could argue that the expectations at LSU is equal to or slightly above what it is at Florida. At Florida, it's all about, to me, 9-10 win seasons. LSU, it's about a national championship because that was the gold standard. Like that's like people are like, well, Derek, well, what do you mean? I'm glad you asked. Because their last national championship was back in 2009 with Ed Ogeron. They went 15-0, Joe Burrow. Basically, they had an NFL roster, Justin Jefferson, NFL stack roster. And then Ed Ogeron, like 22, just the following year, that was COVID year, went 5-5. Following year, 6-6, didn't finish the season, and he was gone. Here's the thing, he was gone 2 years after winning a national championship. 2 years, he was gone. That's expectations, whether it's fair or not. You look at Les Miles, who Ed Ogeron took over for back in 2016. So Les Miles won a national back in 2007. And he lasted all the way up until 2016. There are a lot of double-digit winning seasons. That could save you. That's your saving grace. A national championship, to me, is like an Oscar. It's like it gets you better roles. It gets you opportunity that you would have never had before from a film. You know, that to me is like you could hold on to that for a while until like, are they going to win another? And it's always going to be on your resume. Hey, you won a national championship. Oh, I'm an Oscar winner. But people were like, are you going to win more? You could rest on your laurels a bit. We've seen you can rest on your laurels, and that's fine. And then you look at the coach before that, some guy named what's his name? Nick Saban. Nick Saban won a national championship in 2003, and Nick Saban left for the NFL. He was 9-3, 2004, left. The last three coaches walked away with a national championship. And for Ed Ogeron won in his, which when we talk about full season, 2016, like he took over for Les Miles. So I won't, but full season, he won in his third full season at LSU. For Les Miles, it was his third season. So yeah, 2005, 6, and he won in his 7. So he won in his third season. Nick Saban won in his 1, 2, in his fourth season. Brian Kelly's in his fourth season, and it's not looking good. Like, could they make the college football playoff? Maybe. But people are like, there's context to it. Expectations. It's just like in life. We all have expectations for ourselves and maybe for others. It's about get to delve deep into why the expectation may be too high or too low. But the fact of the matter is that LSU, I can make a case that they expect a national championship every couple of years. And it's fair given the track record of Nick Saban, Les Miles, and Ed Ogeron. Ed Ogeron is going to be back coaching in college. I hopefully soon. I think there's links tying him to Oregon State. I would absolutely love Coach O. He was a great recruiter. Like I remember when he was at like USC and he comes over to LSU. Like he's like I like Ed Ogeron. But for Brian Kelly, it's not working. 34-13 is great. And like listen, in the NBA, we've seen 60-win coaches in the season fired. Expectations. There's something. Whether they're created by fans, whether they're created by administration, or whether we as people create them. Expectations can be lofty. And if we don't reach them, no less exceed them, it feels like it's a failure. And LSU feels like a failure because this is Brian Kelly's fourth season. And as tough as the SEC is, like I could argue in the Big Ten, James Franklin was fired. What did him in was the same thing that felt did Billy Napier in long term. Was that the loss when you lose like the Oregon game? You can get, but that UCLA game, you can't lose that game. Even though Jerry Neuheisel of that team, Tim Skipper and that team, the momentum. You're on the road. You're a big time favorite. You can't lose those games to specifically unranked teams. We were a double-digit favorite. Same thing did Billy Napier in. Same thing. It's like that one win. If he could have beat UCLA, different conversation about Northwestern. So the fact of the matter is that that's a conversation to be had a lot. What are your expectations? Can you meet your expectations? And more importantly, are the expectations realistic? And for a lot of schools, they feel the expectations are realistic. Because, listen, Indiana basketball, UCLA basketball, like basketball school, whatever type of program you are, expectations that you have for your program. Indiana football is doing pretty good. Kurt Signetti got that, turning it around. Oregon's still a solid. Oregon's fine. My point is that, listen, with your expectations, be realistic. Because if anything, the biggest lesson learned from the Tennessee Titans is you don't fire a coach who helped your franchise get to the playoffs on multiple occasions and you didn't have a quarterback. Imagine if he had Cam Ward. Different conversation. And look what he's doing over there with Drake May. Yeah, Josh McDaniels, yeah, but nonetheless, expectations and make sure you're set up to meet those expectations as well. And speaking of expectations, I probably exceeded expectations in your time. Folks, before we get out of here, listen, I think the Chargers can bounce back. I think it's a bounce back game, short week. I think both teams coming with 3 losses. I think they're trying to get, closer. They're trying to get a game, for Minnesota, trying to get a game over 500. Chargers trying to stay pacing now a very competitive AFC West. So I like the Chargers. I think it's +3. I think it's -3.5. If you're bold, you can do 4. But that's just me. But friends and future friends, that's this episode of the Sports and the World podcast. Once again, listen, like, and comment on this episode, every episode of the Sports and the World podcast, wherever you get your podcast, Apple and Spotify. Follow me on social media, Twitter and TikTok, @Ladarius_Brown. Instagram, Ladarius_Brown. Facebook, social media. I'll be putting out previews, as I mentioned. NFL preview over this weekend. And also NBA. Do you want me to preview some NBA games? Let me know on that as well. Or college football games. Let me know that as well, through my social media as well. Well, friends and future friends, until I see and hear you again next time. You hear me again next time, I should say. I'm Ladarius. Be real, be blessed, and be safe. From all of us here from the Sports and the World podcast.